This is the back of a t-shirt that I'm making, and one of my pet peeves is leaving this overlocked seam. I just feel like it looks really ugly, so today I'm going to show you how to cover that using bias binding. So I fold the raw edge of the bias binding in by about 1 centimeter, and then I'm going to start pinning it to the seam on the t-shirt. And I start from one shoulder seam, just pinning the right side of the bias binding to the top of the overlocked seam. And once I get to the other shoulder seam, I'm going to cut the bias binding so it's just 1 centimeter longer than I need, so I can fold in that raw edge again and make sure it's pinned up to the second shoulder seam. Then I'm going to go ahead and sew along this seam using about a 5mm seam allowance, and you'll end up with something like this. So now you're going to go ahead and roll the bias binding in on itself so it forms a kind of casing over the seam allowance. And make sure you're pinning everything nice and neatly. And if you're wanting to add a label like I did, this is now the point where you're going to go and pin it in. And now you're going to go ahead and sew from one shoulder seam to the other, and you're going to go through the back piece of the t-shirt, and you'll be left with something that looks super neat like this. And this is what it looks like from the right side of the t-shirt looking in and on the back of the t-shirt.